Hey folks, I've had a lot of people write in over the last year asking me to do a video on meat cutting. I've been a little reluctant to do so because I am by no means a professional meat cutter, so I don't want to pretend that I am. All I do with my venison is I bone out the deer, and then aside from a few choice cuts like the back straps and the tenderloins and a roast or two, I grind everything into burger and sausage, and I get the best utilization of my animal that way. And if you think about it, how much ground meat a common family eats even in a week's time. You got spaghettis and tacos and meatballs, meatloafs, burritos, you name it. There's a lot of meals we prepare with ground meat. So grinding most of my deer gives me the best utilization of the animal. Now I don't have any fancy meat cutting equipment. I'll just show you what I use and what I recommend. One thing, if you're going to cut up a deer, I highly recommend that you get yourself a nice big cutting board. I got this cutting board. I bought it, I think, through the LEM products. It was either that or Cabela's. It's 2 foot by 3 foot, I believe. You will see further in the video where I take the whole hind end of the deer and I lay it down, and I have a nice sanitary surface to work off of. This cutting board is fantastic. After I'm through, I wash it out and I give it a nice little washing with some bleach solution and get it cleaned up nicely. So here we go. I like to at least cut the hide away, get some of that hair pulled back before I saw the legs off. Now if you have a buck that you're going to mount the antlers, I would just cut here and make this cut, these two together and straight up, and then pull this cape back. But we're not going to do that with this little fella. And so I'm just going to make my skinning process a little bit easier by doing the same incision here that I did on the legs. And then from there, I'm going to cut straight up the hide. Right here on the inside of the leg. You just follow that seam up and meet the other incision. These two incisions is what I would normally do from here and then back, and then pull this off. And then I'm just going to start freeing the hide up a little bit. It peels fairly easy. I like to get this front end freed up before I pull too much of this hide down. Because once you have this hide down and it's flopping down in front of everything, then it's hard to get that stuff cleaned up. So here, I'm just going to slice this up a little ways. Same thing here. And just below this hock here. Now one thing to look out for. When you're getting back in here, you don't want to plunge in real deep with your knife and cut this tendon. There's a tendon here, separates right here. You cut this tendon, this leg is going to flop and he's going to fall to the ground. So you want to just cut the hide and not go through that tendon. Something to look out for. That tendon is what's keeping him on that gambrel there. And get this pulled right off. There we go. And repeat the process on the other side. Get a good grip on the tail area. Hold on to it and let your body weight do it. Now I usually get started right here by taking the shoulders right off. There's no ball and socket joint or anything like that on the whitetail, so you can take these right off just using any old knife. I just keep my knife kind of flat, tight, right to the rib cage, follow it right up. You want to get a good grip on this because it'll get slippery, and once it lets go, you don't want to hit in the floor. That 5-second rule doesn't apply in this shed, I'll tell you that. Now we got a lot of bullet trauma here, so sometimes shooting with a high-powered rifle you'll have some meat loss. But we want to remove all of that and all traces of the fat. grab some of this bullet trauma and remove as much as I can. Okay, once I have the bullet trauma removed, over on this side, you'll see right here, there's a bone right here. Remove any fat. I usually get my knife right alongside that bone. On each side. And then turn my knife and follow that shoulder blade. And just start pulling some of the meat right off the bone. All of this goes into my grind, so I'm not fussy exactly where my cuts are. There's really no rocket science going on here. Again, I'm not following a beef chart. I'm just pulling the meat off the bone, and I'm going to separate all the fat from the meat. I really like the taste of beef and pork fat, but I don't like wild game fat. It's very tallowy. Like if you cut chops and stuff like that, where you have the bone and the marrow, it's often very tallowy and leaves like a little coating on your tongue. I really don't like that very much, so I just assume remove all traces of the wild game fat. And for sausage, I'll add pork fat. Some people add beef fat or stuff like that, but I don't add any beef fat at all to anything. I do add pork fat to my sausage making, but the burger, I grind up just straight burger. If I'm going to have burger that I'm intending to eat as an actual hamburger sandwich, I will grind up some cheap bacon with it, and that works out nicely. Now again, the process here is just to remove the meat from the bone. You don't have to really know what you're doing. There's nothing to get intimidated by. You don't have to be a meat cutter or know the standard cuts on the beef chart. You just want to remove the meat from the bone, make sure there's no deer hair in it, remove the bullet trauma, and then we're going to trim the fat. Once you remove all the meat off the shoulder, you'll have meat that has this layer like a fat skin on it. I usually flip that down, plunge in with my knife, and then go right along the cutting board like that. And that'll remove that from that. Does a nice job of it. Now I have some meat for the grinder. Flip that over, do the same thing. Very nice. Now if you're reading in a book about processing beef or pork, they'll show how when they're trimming the meat, they'll take all these little scraps and throw it in with the grind for your sausage and stuff like that. You can do what you want, but you will have much better results if you keep all those fat trimmings right out of your venison. It doesn't have the same flavor as beef and pork. I want to eliminate it as much as possible from my grind. And now that we got that shoulder done, we're going to move on to the next one. I'm going to move on to the neck here. And any of these layers of meat that I can peel off the hide, I will peel that off and clean that up as well. But here for the neck, I'm going to go ahead and slice through the meat. And cut that off the carcass. Now these necks make a really nice roast in itself, especially if you just put it in a roasting pan, get your vegetables around there, layer some onions, and cook it in about a 200-degree oven all day long. Nice slow roasted, it'll steam a little bit from the moisture in the vegetables, and then it'll just fall apart, be a very nice tasty roast. Okay, after I got the shoulders and the neck all boned out, I'm going to move on and start removing the back straps and tenderloins and work on the rounds. Now again, that neck, they don't bone out very easy, very complex bone system in there, and it's difficult to bone that out and get a lot of the meat off of it. They do make good roasts, it's just not a very attractive cut of meat. Not like a round. You open a pot, you get a nice roast off the round in there, a nice looking cut of meat there. When you're having a neck roast, you're pulling the vertebrae apart and all of that. So if you have company over that's not used to eating wild game, I wouldn't serve them a neck roast. But for yourself or anyone who's used to eating wild game, it is a very, very nice cut of meat. It makes a wonderful roast. Now the back straps are two tubes of meat that run right along the spine. Now those tubes of meat is that round portion of meat that you see on a pork chop. A pork chop is they just they cut right down the center of the spine, and they cut the ribs right about here, and then they slice them between a rib, so you'll have that little bone that's in a pork chop is a piece of a rib, the piece on the base is the spine, and that round cut of meat is this back strap right here. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to make a slice, cut right in, right along the spine, right along like that, and then follow the spine with my knife in its entirety, just like that, both sides. Just bottom that knife right out till it stops, and then work your way down. And right about here, you have a line to follow, right there. I'm going to work my blade in, kind of tilt it up towards the spine. You'll start to feel the ribs there. And then, work my fingers in, start cutting and pulling it free. I take a little getting used to, feeling your way, especially if you've never done it before. Just work that tube of meat right off the rib cage. If you have a bandsaw and you can cut this free and cut yourself some chops, that's fine. But no worries if you don't. This is where your ribeye steaks come from and all of that. But this is a very nice table fare here. Now what I prefer to do with my backstrap is I'll cut them in chunks about that long and then freeze them that way. Then after, once I take it out of the freezer, I can have the options of butterflying them, making kebabs, making a little roast, cutting steaks out of it, doing a number of things. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take a piece about 6 inches long, cut down till I feel that layer of fat on the bottom, and then turn my blade and just slice it right off that layer of fat. Now I have a nice piece of meat here. Now when I take these out of the freezer, one thing I like to do with these is I'll cut it lengthwise, crosswise, make medallions, pound them out with a tenderizing mallet, and then roll them in your favorite steak seasoning, put a piece of bacon around them, put them on a skewer, and cook them, and they're wonderful. Now you can take this, and you can make a butterfly chop, like that. Makes a nice steak for the grill. A number of things you can do. Another thing that I have done before is I take another strip, another strip of back strap. Once you remove all the fat, of course, I make a slice in a little ways. I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch, 3/8 thick piece of meat there. Go almost all the way through. And unroll it. Then you can take this here, season it up a little bit. At deer camp sometime I just put some cheap stovetop stuffing right there. Rolled it all up like a nice stuffed roast. Put it in a roasting pan. Maybe put a little bacon on it, put a little gravy around it, whatever, and bake it. It's yummy. Real good way to have some backstrap right there. So, I'm going to cut the rest of this backstrap right off of this here. And the smaller tips down here, I will just cut into kebab sizes. Pieces like that. This is some really nice tender meat here. Wrap a piece of bacon around it, put it on a skewer, make some really good eats. And I'm going to get this one cut up in the same fashion.